On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, another draft party with Cole Thompson. This time we're talking to receivers. Somebody got to catch it, but who?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation! Welcome to today's episode. I'm your Texas Credential Media member and Texans football analyst John Hickman, alongside the man with the H on his heart, with a love at the hat and the big smile, Brian Big Sarge Barfield. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll close off today's show just looking at how should the Houston Texans address the wide receiver position. And with the draft party with Cole conversation, who should Houston stay away from? Who are some of his favorites? And just which wide receivers should the Houston Texans consider throughout the draft? I like Nick Nash out of San Jose State. I like the two Iowa duo receivers, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. So we'll dive into that. Sarge, I can't wait to have this conversation with Cole. So without further ado, let's get it popping. And the draft party is back with my man, Cole Thompson. Lit up the show a couple days ago. He's back to light it up again. Thank you for stopping by the Locked On Texan podcast. Without further ado, let's dive into it. The talk on the TL right now, Cole, on the Texans Twitter streets, as I like to call them. What do you do with the first pick overall? 25. Do you go guard? Do you go wide receiver? I've seen deep tackle. I've seen tight end if people – like the ideal of Tyler Warren coming to the Houston Texans. But today,
if he's there at 25, let's just start with that one.
Right. That's not going to happen. And I also have my own thoughts about the tight end room here in Houston. But I want to look at the wide receiver position for the draft. Deep class, as it is every year. A lot of receivers, it really is based on where you go, the situation you end up in. But for the Houston Texans, there's no doubt about it. They need to upgrade their room. They desperately need to raise the floor of the wide receiver room. Yeah. And so with you, I want to talk about two guys and then pick your brain, the Iowa State wide receivers, Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel. You're a big Noel fan. I love his tape. I have my notes on him as well. I like Higgins. Just give your breakdown of those two players and if it would make sense for the Houston Texans to target them late in the draft.
I think it would make sense for both of them to be at least in the running. The thing that I like about a guy like Jalen Noel is that he can play in the slot and you can play him as the Z position. This is a 1,000-yard playmaker with Rocco.
Very Jordan Addison-like.
Yeah, very much a Jordan. I think Jordan Addison's a very good comparison. Exceptional route runner. The drops can be a bit of an issue. He had 4 this past season, but he graded out by Pro Football Focus with a receiving grade of 81.7. The yards after contact was really, really promising of 6.2 yards per play. 339 snaps on the inside, 133 snaps on the outside, over 1,100 receiving yards. Guy had 119 targets. So he is a volume type receiver that can work, I think, the intermediate part of the field. And what's going to be an area of weakness going into this year when we talk about the Texans is that intermediate receiver is not in play. Like, I am so sick and tired of people saying, but if Tank Dell does if Tank Dell does everything right, he's on pace to probably be back in December for a run at the postseason. So just act like 2025 is a redshirt year in college for Tank Dell. He's not playing. So you don't have that intermediate receiver, and you aren't guaranteed to get a guy in free agency or even bring back Stephon Diggs, who at this point in his career is probably primarily a slot receiver, to attack that intermediate part of the field. But if you feel like that you've able to add in 1 or 2 players in free agency to where wide receiver can move down the pecking order, not put it to the wayside, but just move it down a little bit, somewhere in that pick 113 to 118 range where we've watched as Nick Caserio in the past has traded on up last year, moving up to 123 to go get Cade Stover. I think Noel is going to be in play in that vicinity. He's a guy that I think is going to really strike some volume at the NFL Combine later on this month. And so if he continues to grow and show what is his capabilities in the slot or on the outside, that is something that I think is really prominent for the Texans. And then we bring up a guy, like you already mentioned, in Jaden Higgins. Higgins, to me, is one of those players who has the size, the catch radius, the frame to mirror Nico Collins. I think that you brought that up, and you brought that up a couple of days ago.
I did. So can I say something to that? This is why I like both of those guys. To your point, I think Higgins is a smooth route runner You're not going to expect for him to do a lot of different things as a receiver, right? He's not a Noel. He's not a Tank Dell like type of guy. He's not one of those all around. But the things that he does well, he's smooth in it. Not a lot of wasted movement in his release. I hate those. A lot of dance at the line. He gets to where he has to go, and he attacks that area. Has the arm and height length that I love for a big catch radius, as you mentioned, and he gives his quarterback extra space to throw the ball over defenders. I really do like him. 29 catches from the slot as well. 64 yards from the slot. Could be an extended roll from him. Great hands. And I mean great hands. Only 2 drops this past year. And also both of these receivers in Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins, they did this with a sporadic quarterback in Beck. So, like, he was very up and down.
I love Beck. See, that's the thing. I love Beck.
I think he's a good
quarterback, but I love that kid.
But some of his throws were a little bit more on the difficult side for especially Noel and his size and his frame. Higgins gives you that opportunity to where no matter where it is, I can make a play. So I think for the Houston Texans, just the idea of having maybe 2 Nico Collins on the field. I would love to see what Higgins' 40-yard dash is going to be. If he's in that 4.4, 4.5 range, that'd be a bonus. But giving C.J. Stroud 2 big catch radius type of guys to make plays, and both of those guys have been known to make 15 yards per catch type of guys, type of catches. Excuse me. So I love Jaden Higgins in Houston. Just what is your overall take about him and the possibility of playing with CJ?
I think he's a poor man's Jack Beck for this offense. So I've been very vocal about Jack Beck being a guy that with Nick Caley would do wonders for this team. Just the way that he plays. Yeah, the way he plays, the way that he can line up inside. He's more of that flex option, good catch radius, smooth hands, really good overall, solid player that can work as a receiving threat and as a blocker in that West Coast style that you really want to see. And there's a lot of similar traits that what you see in Jaden Higgins in a Jack Beck. But I also see a lot of Xavier Hutchinson in him as well. And I know that sounds really far-fetched because they were both at the same school, and then we both got them out of Iowa State, and they both put up awesome numbers with quality quarterback play and route to a Big 12 championship appearance. And so, like, little things like that carry a lot of weight for me. But the thing that I wonder about him is that can he be more than just a wide receiver 3 or a wide receiver 4? He is a little bit lower on my rankings compared to Jalen Noel because I like Jalen Noel's speed. I like Jalen Noel's route running. I think that he's a little bit more refined when it comes to his cuts, to his breaks. I think in the flanker position, when you look at a guy like Jaden Higgins, is very limited in terms of who he is as the receiver, the X receiver. He is an X receiver. The contested catch radius is freaking awesome. Like, if you watch him play, 50-50 balls are more like 75-25. Like, neither one's a bad option. I think that for Nick Caley's system, if you were to put a gun to my head right now and said, which one do I think is a better fit? Honestly, it's Higgins. But which one am I more excited about seeing working with CJ Stroud? For me, it's Noel. But to be fair, there's not a wrong answer here. Caley, I think, would do wonders working with Higgins. I think he would have a field day scheming up plays for Noel.
So here's a guy we both agree on. We talked about it a little bit before we started, recording this show, and he screams perfect, and I mean perfect Nick Caley, because he's coming from the tree of Sean McVay type of guy.
Yeah.
And that's San Jose State's Nick Nash. Yeah. 6'3", 195, played over 1,000 snaps this past season, equally shared between outside and slot. But he could definitely be your next version of a Cooper Kupp. 91 slot catches, over 1,200 slot yards in his final season. He had nearly 1,400 yards, 16 TDs. He is a high-volume player for San Jose State, so that matters. He was formerly a quarterback. The background matters, but he has really good hands. And out of the 3 guys we've named, I think he has the best hands of all 3. I think he does a very good job with his head movement at the line of scrimmage. Again, not a lot of wasted movement when in terms of getting out of his release. He can fight through physicality at the line of scrimmage with defenders. Doesn't necessarily avoid it, but he can fight through it. What is your take about the idea of just a Nick Nash? Because, I mean, he screams Cooper Kupp.
Okay.
Deep breath.
Yeah, he's okay. He's a fit. Like he's a fit. I'm not going to disagree with that.
Puka Nacua. I mean, prototypical what we saw from a successful offense. That's what he screams to me.
He's a fit. He's a developmental fit. That's a guy I'm taking in day 3, and I'm taking as a flyer in round 5. Like, if you're asking me right now for the hands, absolutely. Like, I would agree with you. I think that he has such surefire hands compared to Jalen Noel, compared to Jaden Higgins. I'd even throw in some guys like Torrey Horton, Ricky White from UNLV. You can throw in a couple of other bigger names that we've already, like, that are being mentioned right now, like Eric Alamior out of Stanford. Like, I believe that Nick Nash may have one of, if not the best hands in the NFL draft. But there is so much more to his game that I have to continue to see, that I'm just not ready to bank on as a legit day one coming on in, being that enforceful impact as a route runner and as a receiver. I look back at some of his games. The Washington State game, he had over 225 receiving yards, which was a really good performance, but he also was playing against zone coverage. So a lot of the time he had like that good cushion to be able to win and then turn up the field. So what do you look like when you're playing in press man coverage against a Tyson Campbell against Jacksonville in week 13 and he's shutting you down and now you're eliminated from the play? So those are some things that I worry about. I think the other thing that I worry about is, can he play on the outside at the next level? Because yeah, he's 6'3" and he has the good frame, but at the same time, this is a guy that still is learning how to play the position. And a lot of times what we see when players shift gears or move roles, especially like a Braxton Miller was one. Like, he was 6'2". I think it was like 198 pounds or 200 pounds or whatever he was. When he went to wide receiver at Ohio State, they said, nope, you're a slot guy. Like we have to play you in the slot because if we don't think that you're physical enough to handle the outside containment. So is he limited to being in the slot? And if he's limited to being in the slot, does that limit his route tree? What are going to be his intangibles when it comes to his 40 time? What are we going to see in the 3-cone drill? Change of direction. Those are some little things that I look at. I don't think he's an elite separator. The experience is a good thing. Like this is a guy that not only has 6 years of college experience, so there's very little left for him to learn about the IQ of the game, but he still is learning how to play a wide receiver. And the other thing that I really appreciate, Hick, is that this is a guy that played quarterback. So he can have a good understanding about what the quarterback is looking for in terms of where I need to be, where the ball is going to land, all those other things. But if you're asking me to bank on Nick Nash being the wide receiver number 3 by the end of the 2025 season for the Houston Texans, that is a tall drink of water that I am not willing to gargle on down. That is one to where I will say very similar to a guy like Xavier Hutchinson, very similar to guys like Puka Nacua when he was coming out. I'm banking on the skills and the skill set to eventually transition into a big role. But I am not believing that this is a guy that can come in week 1 and be an immediate X factor contributor for my team.
We got more Texans talk on the other side. We got to talk about some of your favorites that nobody is talking about, and maybe some guys that the Houston Texans should stay away from. More Texans, don't go nowhere. All right, Texas fans, as a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hit 5. So that's where LinkedIn Job comes in. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free and share it within your network. And you get qualified candidates all in one place. LinkedIn has a new feature that can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with a deep candidate insight. And here's a pro tip: add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high-quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Cole Thompson, Mr. Cole Thompson, if you're nasty for draft talk. So Jalen Royals, Utah State guy, right?
Utah State boy.
That's your guy. I'm not very impressed right now, but I mean, just sell me on it. Yeah. What am I missing?
Okay, so let's start off with the fact that he put up monster numbers the last few years when he was at Utah State in an organization and a program that was going through dismay. Blake Anderson was fired right before the start of the regular season. They bring in I'm blanking on who was the interim head coach, but then they lose multiple players to the NFL means at the transfer portal. he decides to stick around. 3 of my favorite skill sets that I think really make him such a good player is he's dynamic in the open field. One of the more dangerous players in college football after the catch. He was number 2 among FBS senior wide receivers in yards after contact of 9.6. So he does a good job of being able to make defenders miss in open space. Much like we talk about with Jalen Noel, and much as we talk about with some other receivers, potentially like a Savion Williams from TCU, or maybe we'll throw in an Xavier Restrepo, he's interchangeable with his positions. I view him as a bigger Tank Dell when it comes to the speed and when it comes to his flexibility to play the Z position and in the slot. Tank Dell weighs about 170 pounds. Jalen Royals weighs about 200 pounds. It's coming in about 5'11". So a little bit of a bigger frame. I think a bigger catch radius. I think he does a good job of tracking the football. I think the other thing is that he does a good job keeping that long speed, and he's very effective whenever you want to get him in that intermediate 15 to 18 yard range part of the field, to where he's elongating the play and being able to change that tempo of direction at a timely manner that allows him to win at the point of attack and even force cornerbacks to slip at times. And the other part that I really like about him is that he's a dude that does a good job of working in the quick passing game. So he finds those little crevices in between defensive backs and is able to make plays in a well-positioned manner. I do agree with you. There are some things he's going to have to work on. When you talk about him getting stuck in a window or like in that tight man coverage, he can have a little bit of trouble getting off the line of scrimmage. He's somebody that doesn't win initially with physicality. A lot of his guess game is when it comes to winning because of speed and because of his overall route running technique. But I do think that when you look at his overall upside, this is a wide receiver 3. This is a guy that has starting Z potential that, depending on if you want to play him against a speedier nickel defender, you can shift him inside on certain plays. Last season had over 1,000 receiving. 2023 had over 1,000 receiving yards. Really quality, sound playmaker. This is a late day 2, early day 3 name that I think that when you look at currently what you're going to have to target in the NFL free agency market, a complimentary wide receiver 2, and then competition to bring in with John Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson for wide receiver 3. When we talked about this a couple days ago, I said there was a lot of guys with lower floors, but higher ceilings. I think that when you look at Jalen Royals, and if you get back a healthy Tank Dell, your pecking order of wide receiver 1 being Nico Collins, wide receiver 2 being Tank Dell, wide receiver 3, and one of the better wide receiver 3s in the NFL with Jalen Royals just gives CJ Stroud more opportunities to work. And it also gives you flexibility on lining up certain players in certain positions to help you win at the point of attack.
Shout out to Swan. She mentioned, we just saw Jalen Hurts go out there and win a Super Bowl with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith as his 2 weapons on the outside, right? And, her question was, why are we always trying to find late round, players? And my response to that was, I just like doing the research on late round picks, because the first round guys are always going to get the notoriety. They're always going to get the ESPNs. We don't find out about a lot of these guys until later on, or draft season if you're really tapped in. And so I like the conversation of just who the Houston Texans should really look into round 3, round 4, round 5, round 6, and potentially round 7. Some of these guys are going to drop. We may be hype about them, but other teams may not be as big on them. So I appreciate you coming on. I do want to add Nick Nash played a lot of snaps in the slot. So did Cooper Kupp throughout his entire career. Over half of his snaps were in the slot. 2019 was a Triple Crown year. He could be a guy that for a late round pick, 5 and 6, could come in and compete. And also, I think because of Nick Caley's background, hopefully you look at New England, you look at LA, using guys that may be interchangeable from positions, quarterback to receiver, and just tough-nosed guys can have some success in the offense that we presume we'll see. Now, who are some guys the Houston Texans should absolutely just say, you're not for us?
Ooh, not for us. Okay, that's a good one. See, you threw me off a loop here because I thought you were going to say we're for us. Okay, I'm just throwing this out here because I just don't like him as a prospect, and I know that I get a lot of flack for it. I'm not an Isaiah Bond guy. I'm not. I get that there's a lot of speed there, but there's also a lot of drops. I think that he rounds off the top of his routes. I think that he is somewhat of a one-trick pony. And when you look back at that game against Georgia in the SEC championship, and Hick,
I don't want to.
I would say, Hick, you're a Texas fan. That interception on Quinn Ewers, the player that everyone seems to hate for no reason, that wasn't on Quinn. That was on Isaiah Bond not being physical, going up against Everett in man coverage. If I have CJ Stroud trying to make a throw into a tight window, I need my wide receiver to be wanting to make that punch, wanting to deliver that strike. And so if I can't get that from you, I'm just going to politely say thanks, but no thanks. It's not you. It's more so a me kind of thing. I think Kobe Hudson from UCF is a name that's going to gain a lot of traction because of his speed coming out of UCF during his time at the NFL Scouting Combine later this month. I politely would steer away from him. I don't think that he's physical enough to work in what Nick Caley wants. And a big thing that I'm looking for these wide receivers that are going to come on in and be, at least I would say, contributors early on, is their willingness to block.
Because that's what Houston needs.
Yeah, they need contributors that are going to be willing to lay their body on the line with their brethren, like they are in trench warfare and protecting them from the snipers that are coming deep down. But you got to have every little piece that is completely pontificated if you want to be able to work that way. A name that I really do like is a late round pick is Kyle Williams from Washington State. I thought
his name has been rising up a lot of the ranks. I've been
really good wide receiver for. And here's the thing that I like about like a guy like Kyle Williams. He's a jack of all trades and master of none. And a lot of people get annoyed by that term. But I also can tell you that this is a guy that will be at worst a wide receiver for that will help out and contribute on special teams, help you inside the red zone when you want to run more of a spread formation, and also be timely effective as, I would say, maybe an extra body in camp. And his upside is a wide receiver 3. So I'm getting a guy that will have some type of role for a fraction of the price as some of the other names like Matthew Golden, Emeka Ibuka. Probably you could even throw in Eric Alamior at this point. 2 more names I think are kind of a little bit of a reach right now. Juice Wells from Ole Miss did not have a good final season during his time with the Rebels. I thought was fine. It wasn't great. Definitely a guy that I wonder about when it comes to his not mental processing, but more so his physical approach. Does he want to be in that conversation? And then I will go with another guy, Keandre Lambert-Smith. I think that he is a vertical threat. I think he is a very solid vertical threat. I think he did a good job of establishing himself as a wide receiver 1 at Auburn this past year. But I didn't see that physicality as a run blocker. I think that part of the reason why Auburn steered away from the run sometimes is that they didn't have the ability to win at the second and third level of the defense because of the inability to block. So if I'm getting a one-trick vertical threat, I don't want a Will Fuller. I want a dude that's going to be willing to block. A name that I do want to throw out there that is simply getting forgotten about in round 2 that needs to be talked about more is Trey Harris out of the University of Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
Everyone is forgetting about this dude, and he was en route to being the Biletnikoff Award winner in 2024 before Travis Hunter because of he and Jackson Dart were speaking the same language. 6'3", good catch radius, physical player. If you watch him run some of those quick little slant routes, he is dragging outside linebackers and safeties for an extra 4 or 5 yards. And he also is a very nuanced season route runner. Had 1,000 yards this past season, helped Ole Miss get to back-to-back 10-win years for the first time in over 2 decades, if I'm not mistaken. There's a lot to like about his overall frame, his catch radius, his footwork. He's not a finished product, but this is one of those guys who I think that we're going to be talking about after the combine. Like, hey, why were we kind of forgetting about him?
Sounds like DK a little bit.
There's a little bit. I would say probably smaller version because DK I think is like 6'4" and like
DK is a little bit bigger,
28 pounds. I think Harris is like 206 and 6'3". But like I'm seeing people talk about DK getting traded to Houston. I'm like, guys, how about reset the clock with the DK and get yourself a player that can get you 18 yards after the catch. But also, if you want to line him up inside in certain plays, just dink and dunk it and watch him beat up on linebackers and punch him in the face while he's getting a first down and smiling while doing it.
I think Houston should be able to look and say, we got a guy that we like early on. We got a guy that we think can help raise our floor later in the draft. Because I also feel like, the time with Xavier Hutchinson may have passed, come and go. Sure. I also feel like the time with John Minchie may have come and gone. So, bringing in some guys that can compete during camp, 6th-round picks, they don't make it a lot, but they can compete during camp. And also for Nick Caley's purpose, hey, I like this guy, and I like him for a reason. He wasn't here last year, has nothing to do with what happened last year. Let me bring in a guy that I think I could work with and work into my offense and do the things that are specific to the success of my offense. Cole, can't wait to have you back on, man.
The one thing I will say, if I am Nick Caley going into this job, I have to have a say on certain players to add in the offense. If you want this offense to take that next step forward, trust me entirely, CJ. I got you. We got to be on the same wavelength. I got you. Appreciate you having me on, Hick.
Nick Nash sounds like the guy.
Jalen Royals sounds like the guy.
When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's number one sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to be able to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can always stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel. My family members out of town always tell me, hey, listen, FanDuel is the best out there. Why? Well, because it's super easy to navigate, super easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. So I just send my money over to them. We make it flip. We bring it back home. And then right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. That was a great conversation with Cole Thompson, just discussing what the Houston Texans should do with the wide receiver position this offseason. It's definitely a priority.
Yeah.
Sergeant. You know, I want to get your take on what the Houston Texans should do. Should they go out there and get a more savvy vet that has some time invested into the NFL? Are there any guys on this roster you want to see come back? Just what's your overall thought?
John, I know that a lot of people are not going to like what I'm about to say, but Nick Caley is coming from a system under Sean McVay that we've watched two wide receivers, John, that weren't highly decorated coming out of college. Puka Nacua wasn't highly decorated coming out of college. Cooper Kupp wasn't highly decorated coming out of college. And I think that with the way that the Houston Texans are cash strapped right now, and I think that bringing in and drafting a wide receiver is going to be a rookie who has to learn how to navigate himself through in the NFL, learn the playbook, learn how to do day-to-day activities when it comes to being in the NFL. John, I think that there's two wide receivers on the team already that the Houston Texans can use. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that the Houston Texans need a wide receiver too. And if they can find that in free agency, if they can just find somebody to fill that void, or they can bring back Stephon Diggs, then I can definitely understand that. If they can find a wide receiver, what we talked about earlier this week, if they can find a wide receiver too, somebody that they maybe can insert into that position and their instant offense from day one, then maybe. But John, I still believe in Xavier Hutchinson. I still believe in John Mechie. And I feel like if Nick Caley has studied and watched everything that Sean McVay has done, and he's able to implement a lot of that Rams offense like we've talked about before, he's able to implement that type of offense into the Houston Texans. I think that Xavier Hutchinson and I think that John Mechie I think they'll get more production out of them. I think that they could be that other wide receiver that you need, because when you look at the system under Bobby Slowick, when you look at it under Ben McDaniels, who's going to have to change his style as well. When you look at it under Bobby Slowick, it was always, and what we've talked about on this show on numerous times, trust the play, trust the play, trust the play. Well, sometimes you got to let wide receivers trust their instincts, because there was too many times throughout this season when Xavier Hutchinson was on the field, or when John Mechie was on the field, when they were used as decoys, or when they were used to block, or when they were used to just run dummy routes. There's not a route that John Mechie cannot run. And I think that we've seen some of that when Mechie and Stroud were on the same page. I definitely seen it throughout training camp. And I know that people are going to talk about where they dropped some passes. They dropped some passes, or they may have ran some wrong routes. Every wide receiver does that. So if you can get, especially with Xavier Hutchinson, if you could have Nico Collins as a big wide receiver on one side and have Xavier Hutchinson as a big wide receiver on the other side, both of them have gotten their feet wet in the NFL, and they know what it takes now to be an NFL wide receiver. A lot of people are not going to receive this, the right way. And a lot of people are going to say, Sarge, you're crazy. But I honestly and truly believe, John, that they could still make something happen with Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie.
I'm chuckling because I saw a few of the comments on YouTube regarding Kenyon Green coming back.
Yeah.
And the Sarge, you're crazy was the consistent thought between a few of our watchers and listeners out
That's
there. Thank y'all for
documented though
checking
in
us
my
out.
VA health information, so I'm good with that.
You know, I look at the situation like this when I look at the current wide receivers on the roster. The theme is the floor is extremely low, right?
Mhm.
And for Nick Caley coming over, right? Who's his inside guy right now? It's Cole Popovich.
Yeah.
Hey Cole, talk to you real quick. Hey man, you know what I want to do. You know what we were able to do and be a part of in terms of a successful offense in New England. You've seen the successful offense in the last couple of years in LA. You know what CJ Stroud, he's mentioned on a couple of occasions when he looked at the greatest offenses he's ever seen. New England, LA comes up. You know what he likes. Give me some insight on these two young men right now. And the two young men I'm talking about, of course, is John mentioned Xavier Hutchinson. I think that could probably go away. But for Nick Caley coming into a new situation, Nico's paid already. And Nico is a top 9 to 13 receiver in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
If he's healthy, we're seeing monstrous numbers out of him this year. So he's not going anywhere and he's under contract. Tank's talent is there, but he's not even in the conversation right now because of the injury. That's two receivers there that you can put to the side. The other two guys are not my guys. Those two guys are not guys that should warrant the respect of bringing back automatically. I wouldn't be upset if Nick Caley and Nick Caserio had a conversation, and the conversation is, I need at least two new dudes. Because what I want to do, I know Nico can do it. He's the end-all, be-all. Tank Dell isn't going anywhere until otherwise. Those other two guys, thank you for your services, but you're not the prototype wide receiver that I'm looking for. And with that being said, I would be completely okay if the Houston Texans looked at both of those guys and said, hey, we're going to move on.
And John, okay, so if you do that, right? If you do that, who are you bringing in? Because you don't have any money. Yeah. Like, and Nick Caserio doesn't know how to work with the draft picks, and without the cash, he's not going to be able to do what the Rams did, like we talked about with the picks. He's not going to be able to do with the salary cap, like what the Philadelphia Eagles did. So now, I mean, John, I'm going to be honest with you. There's some guys that we've mentioned on this show that I'm saying to myself, nah, I don't think I would want them on this team either. So if you're going to do it, what's going to have to happen is you're probably going to lose some of your talent. You probably have to get rid of like at least one or two guys that you probably don't want to get rid of if you're looking to bring in that type of number 2 wide receiver. Cooper Kupp should not be here. He is too old.
I don't think it should be Coop. I think the Houston Texans should absolutely look to get younger, but I also think that there are some available vets out there that can help raise the floor. I mentioned Rondell Moore. People laugh. I mentioned Tutu Atwell. People laugh. But the fact is, both of those two guys, Elijah Moore is also a free agent. Those three guys have done more in the NFL than Hutch and Mechie. And I think they would be able to come in and be an immediate impact day one. I think Houston is in a very interesting position. You absolutely need to bring in two new guys. And the reason why I wanted to talk to Cole was simply because there are going to be some guys in the later rounds. There always is.
But they are up against a wall, John, because the Texans have no money.
They don't. So, and this is why the draft later rounds is very important. And I will say this, when you look at where some of these receivers that has played for in either the New England system, and I hate to keep bringing that up, or the Rams system, they've been able to find guys late to fit the system and be productive. And that's what matters.
So you went from talking about scheme, you changed from scheme to system.
Well, I mean,
it's the same word. It's synonymous.
It is, but the productivity from some guys that Nick Caley can come in and say, I just like his skill set more than what you bring to this team right now.
And I can understand that, John. I definitely can understand that. And if Xavier Hutchinson and John Mechie are not with this team anymore, okay, I understand that. But, John, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't see this as a good wide receiver draft either, though.
And Houston got to do something, man. Thank y'all for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Nick Caley's talking to us soon, so we can't wait to dive into that. Follow us on Twitter and YouTube at Locked On Texans. Subscribe, like, and comment as well.
And make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Sarge Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gents, peace.